It just doesn't make sense. How does Maura Murray just disappear?
Vanished. The disappearance of Maura Murray, a promising life. In the quiet New England town of Hanson, Massachusetts, the Murray family was known for discipline, achievement, and pride. Fred Murray, the patriarch, worked as a medical technician and raised his children with a military-style emphasis on order and drive. Of his 5 children, Maura Murray, the youngest daughter, stood out as a star. Born on May 4, 1982, Maura was exceptional from a young age. She was bright, athletic, and charming. Teachers called her focused and gifted. Friends described her as both confident and reserved, with a deep loyalty to those close to her. Her achievements mirrored her ambition. She was a standout in cross-country running, and she excelled in math and science, an early sign of her analytical mind. By her late teens, Maura was on a fast track. After a brief stint at the United States Military Academy at West Point, she transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst to pursue a career in nursing. Friends at UMass called her warm but mysterious driven, yet sometimes hard to read. She worked 2 part-time jobs to support herself, one at an art gallery security desk and another in campus dorm security. Maura's boyfriend, Bill Rausch, was an Army officer stationed in Oklahoma. Their relationship was intense, sustained by long-distance calls and visits, but complicated by distance and the pressures of young adulthood. Maura often confided in her sister Kathleen and her father Fred, who remained a strong presence in her life. But behind the bright future, there were hints of turbulent small signs that all was not well. In late 2003, Maura was caught using a stolen credit card number to order food from a local restaurant. While minor, it stood in stark contrast to her otherwise clean image. Her family brushed it off as a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. But for some, it was the first signal that Maura may have been carrying burdens she wasn't sharing. Despite this, by early 2004, Maura was planning for the future. She had recently spoken about transferring to a nursing program closer to Bill. She was doing well in school and had just come off a visit with her father. That weekend, Fred had driven to Amherst to help her look for a new car. None of them knew it would be the last time they'd ever see her. Cracks beneath the surface. The days leading up to Maura Murray's disappearance were filled with subtle, puzzling signs clues that only took on ominous meaning in hindsight. These weren't dramatic red flags, but quiet missteps and emotional turbulence that hinted at a deeper unease. On Thursday, February 5, 2004, Maura was working the late shift at her campus security job at Melville Hall, a dormitory at UMass Amherst. Just after 1 a.m., her supervisor noticed Maura seemed visibly upset. When asked what was wrong, Maura only replied, "My sister." No more explanation was given. What happened during that shift is still debated. Kathleen Murray, Maura's older sister, later admitted in interviews that they had spoken on the phone that night. Kathleen had been battling addiction and relapsed recently. She told Maura about an upsetting event with her fiancé and alcohol. It's unclear whether this call truly upset Maura, whether something else had happened that she never shared. Just hours later, Maura's demeanor would shift again. The car accident. On Saturday, February 7th, Fred Murray visited Amherst. He and Maura spent the day car shopping, but she didn't find anything suitable. That night, they went to dinner with a friend and later returned to a liquor store, where Fred purchased alcohol for Maura and her friends. Fred later claimed that Maura never had a fake eye. He'd simply bought it for her, as many college parents do. Maura borrowed her father's new Toyota Corolla to attend a dorm party. Sometime after 2:30 a.m., she crashed it into a guardrail while returning to her father's motel. Police reported the accident, but did not arrest her. She was uninjured, though visibly shaken. She later admitted to causing about $8,000 in damage to Fred's car. Fred, ever the protective parent, told her not to worry, insurance would handle it. But something about the crash shook Maura deeply. On Sunday, she seemed off. Fred recalled her being nervous and remorseful, yet distant. They agreed she would pick up the necessary accident forms on Monday. Monday, February 9th, 2004. The last known day. The final known day of Maura's life started like any other, except it wasn't. That morning, She sent an email to her nursing school professors, explaining she'd be missing classes due to a death in the family. This was a lie. No one in her family had died. It's still unclear why she fabricated the excuse. Around the same time, she called a number for lodging in Vermont and New Hampshire, including a condominium complex her family had vacationed at in the past. She also emailed her boyfriend, telling him she loved him and would talk later. Then she packed up her belongings, some neatly placed in boxes, others tossed carelessly into bags. Her dorm room didn't appear empty, but it had the signs of someone who wasn't returning immediately. She withdrew $280 in cash from her bank account and purchased about $40 in alcohol, including Bailey's, vodka, and a box of wine. Some of these bottles would later be found in her car. At 3:15 p.m., Maura left campus and drove north in her black 1996 Saturn sedan. She did not tell anyone where she was going, not her boyfriend, her roommate, her professors, or her family. By 7:27 p.m., she crashed her car for a second time, this time on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, hundreds of miles from Amherst. It was the last confirmed sighting of Maura Murray. The final days, the image of Maura Murray's 1996 Saturn disabled on the side of Route 1212 in Woodsville, a small village in Haverhill, New Hampshire, has become one of the most haunting and perplexing symbols in American true crime lore. By the time local law enforcement arrived on the scene that night, Maura was gone and has never been seen again. Monday evening, February 9, 2004. Around 7:27 p.m., a resident of Haverhill named Faith Westman made a 911 call. She and her husband had seen a car off the road and lightly damaged near a sharp curve known for accidents. A young woman presumed to be Maura was seen walking around the vehicle. Roughly 5 to 10 minutes later, a local bus driver named Butch Atwood stopped at the scene. He pulled up next to the Saturn and saw the driver, whom he described as a slim young woman with long dark hair. She appeared cold and shaken. Butch asked if she needed help or if he should call the police. Maura declined both offers and insisted she had already called AAA, though there's no evidence she made any such call. There was no cell service in the area. Sensing she was alone and possibly scared, Butch drove to his nearby house and called 911 at 7:42 p.m. to report the accident. He also watched from his home until the police arrived, not seeing anyone leave the car or walk down the road. By the time Officer Cecil Smith of the Haverhill Police Department arrived at 7:46 p.m., just minutes later, Maura was gone. The Saturn was found facing westbound, the opposite direction from which Maura had likely been traveling. The windshield was cracked on the driver's side, and both airbags had deployed. A box of wine had spilled inside, and the car was locked. Inside, police found Maura's dorm room printouts related to Vermont lodgings, a book on mountain climbing, a stuffed animal, her favorite black backpack and wallet were missing, the alcohol she had purchased, with some opened, a rag stuffed in the tailpipe later, one of the most mysterious elements of the scene. The presence of the rag puzzled everyone. Maura's father, Fred, would later claim he had advised her to use a rag to reduce smoke emission from her cars. Exhaust system, her Saturn was old and prone to breakdowns, but the fact that it was still stuffed in during travel remained suspicious to many. There were no footprints in the snow indicating someone had walked far, nor were there signs of a struggle or attack near the car. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. That night, the police presumed Maura was either picked up by a passerby or had fled the scene to avoid consequences, perhaps due to alcohol in the car or fear of a second accident within days. No attempt was made to treat the situation as a potential missing person case until the next day. Officer Smith later said that the event didn't initially raise red flags. In many small towns, single-car accidents with uninjured drivers who leave the scene aren't treated as emergency situations. Tuesday, February 10, 2004. By the morning, Maura's family still didn't know she was missing. They were alerted only when UMass contacted Fred Murray to report that Maura hadn't shown up to pick up accident forms. Fred, in turn, contacted police and was stunned to hear her car had been found abandoned. He immediately drove to New Hampshire. The New Hampshire Fish and Game Department and local police began a ground and air search of the wooded area surrounding the crash. Cadaver dogs, helicopters, Snowmobiles and foot patrols scoured the snow-covered region. No scent trail was found. No evidence of Maura in the forest. No body, no personal belongings. Nothing. Unanswered questions. Why had Maura traveled hundreds of miles to New Hampshire without telling anyone? Where was she going? A quiet retreat. A new life. To meet someone? Had she been picked up willingly or otherwise by someone on Route 112? Or had she succumbed to the cold in the woods after running from the crash? Each possibility only led to more mystery. The crash on Route 112 was the fulcrum of the Maura Murray case. The moment when everything transitioned from a troubled young woman's detour to an enduring, unsolved mystery. To understand how someone could vanish so completely from a populated area just minutes before police arrived is to stare into the black hole at the center of this story. Route 112, so known as the wild Amunisac Road, winds through the White Mountains of New Hampshire. It's a two-lane highway surrounded by forests, hills, and small residential homes spread out over long stretches of rural terrain. In February, the road can be treacherous, covered in snow and ice, poorly lit, and virtually empty after nightfall. On the night of February 9, 2004, Maura's car crashed at a sharp curve near the weathered barn corner, between Bradley Hill and Wild Amunisac Road. It's not a particularly remote location. A few homes dotted the area, and multiple neighbors, including the Westmans and Butch Atwood, witnessed the immediate aftermath. The crash itself, when Officer Cecil Smith arrived at the scene at 7:46 p.m., the Saturn was locked, and there was no sign of Maura. Curiously, the car appeared to have sustained front-end damage, but not severe enough to indicate a high-speed impact. The windshield was cracked, and the airbags had deployed. Yet, the car was found facing west, suggesting it had spun around. There were signs the vehicle may have bottomed out, potentially damaging the undercarriage or oil pan. There were no working lights, and it appeared the car was disabled. The rear tires were stuck in a small ditch or snowbank. Inside the car, law enforcement found a box of Franzia wine, partially spilled across the interior, an empty beer bottle, a printed email regarding relationship trouble with her boyfriend, directions to lodging in Vermont, her class schedule, a book about hiking in the White Mountains, her favorite stuffed animal. But notably missing were Maura's cell phone, her wallet and credit cards, her black backpack, a signature item she was known to always carry. These items were never recovered. The rag in the tailpipe. One of the most bizarre details was the rag found stuffed into the tailpipe of the Saturn. Fred Murray, Maura's father, later explained that this was a tactic he had shown her to reduce smoke emissions when a car burns oil. Her car, he said, was old and prone to mechanical issues. The theory was that she may have done this to prevent the car from drawing attention due to smoke. But critics pointed out, why would someone drive with the rag still in the tailpipe? Wouldn't that risk stalling the engine or triggering damage? More darkly, others suggested the rag might have been placed there to cause the car to break down intentionally, or as an attempt at carbon monoxide poisoning. Though this theory lacks support, given the lack of evidence, Maura was in the car after the crash. Still, the detail was unnerving and became one of the most widely debated facts of the case. The time gap, 7:27 to 7:46 p.m. This 19-minute window remains the most critical time frame in the case. During this time, Faith Westman saw the accident and called 911 at 7:27 p.m. Butch Atwood arrived shortly afterward and spoke with the woman believed to be Maura. Atwood drove home and called 911 himself at 7:42 p.m. Officer Smith arrived at 7:46 p.m. Just 4 minutes after Atwood's calling, Maura was gone. There was no sign of footprints leading away from the crash scene, which was strange considering snow was on the ground. Police dogs would later fail to pick up any strong scent trail, though some reports claim a brief track was followed about 100 yards east before being lost, possibly at the spot where someone could have picked her up. The question remains, did Maura leave on foot? Did she hitch a ride? Was she taken against her will? Butch Atwood's testimony. Butch Atwood remains one of the most important witnesses in the case. His last sighting of Maura was when she declined his help and said she had already called AF. But this raises several questions. There was no cell reception at the crash site. How could she have called anyone? Why didn't Maura accept Butch's offer of help, or Rede especially, if she was cold and alone? Was she simply afraid of being reported to police? Had she been drinking? Was she trying to flee consequences? Butch said Maura seemed sober and calm, but slightly dazed. He did not believe she was injured. After returning home, he kept an eye on the road from his window, but didn't see her leave the car or enter another vehicle. This would later fuel theories that she may have disappeared into the woods, had a prearranged pickup, or was abducted in the short window before police arrived. What was she running for more toward? The oddness of Maura's behavior is the case's heartbeat. Why did she leave school without telling anyone? Emailed professors about a fake death in the family? Drive to a remote part of New Hampshire in February? Bring printed directions to an area her family had vacationed in? Lock her car and seemingly vanish? These aren't the actions of someone casually skipping class, nor do they clearly indicate suicide. The ambiguity of those missing pieces makes the case so endlessly debated. A missing person. Maura Murray was not officially declared a missing person on the night of February 9, 2004. That delay, just a matter of hours, would go on to become one of the most heavily scrutinized decisions in the case, especially given how fast people can vanish in the wilderness or fall victim to foul play. In small-town New Hampshire, where single-car accidents are often routine, the assumption was simple. A young woman had crashed her car and likely left the scene to avoid police involvement, either because she had been drinking, was under stress, or planned to return later. But Maura never did. Tuesday, February 10, 2004. By early morning, Officer Cecil Smith had arranged to have the Saturn towed to the police impound lot. Still, no missing person alert had been filed. That changed only when Fred Murray, Maura's father, was contacted by UMass later that morning after she failed to show up to get insurance forms for the Saturday accident. Fred immediately knew something was wrong. He began calling Maura's friends, the university, and her boyfriend, Bill Rausch. No one had heard from her. Fred contacted the Haverhill Police Department, who told him her car had been found the night before, but not Maura. He and other family members drove to Haverhill that same day, and it was only then that a missing person investigation was officially opened. Early search efforts. In the hours and days that followed, police, volunteers, and search and rescue teams launched what would become a significant but ultimately unsuccessful search operation. Authorities used tracking dogs. One bloodhound allegedly followed Maura's scent for about 100 yards east of the crash, toward a location known as French Pond Road, before losing it possibly where a vehicle picked her up. Helicopters. Equipped with heat sensors, helicopters searched the woods and nearby fields. Snowmobiles and ATVs. These were used to access deep forest terrain and trails. Foot patrols and K-9 units combed the surrounding area. Nothing was found. No footprints, no clothing, no blood, no signs of a struggle. There were also no confirmed sightings of Maura anywhere in the area. Initial law enforcement assessment. Law enforcement's early working theory was non-criminal in nature. They believed Maura had fled the scene due to fear of being arrested or cited, been picked up by someone she knew or a passing stranger, possibly died of exposure in the nearby woods, especially given the freezing temperatures. They treated the situation as a runaway case rather than a potential crime scene. This assessment would later draw heavy criticism from her family and crime experts, who believed the first 48 hours were not treated with enough urgency. Family response and frustration. Fred Murray was immediately suspicious. He believed something bad had happened to his daughter, and that she had not simply wandered off. To Fred, the scene didn't make sense. Why would Maura leave her car in sub-zero temperatures without her belongings? Why didn't the dogs find a stronger scent trail? Why wouldn't she have reached out to anyone by now? Fred and his family believed from the start that someone had picked Maura up with her, voluntarily or by force, and that police had missed a critical opportunity to investigate the crash site as a crime scene. Over the coming days, Fred Murray would organize his own searches, handing out flyers, knocking on doors, and confronting neighbors, some of whom he suspected were hiding something. Bill Rausch's involvement. Maura's boyfriend, Bill Rausch, flew in from Oklahoma, where he was stationed at Fort Sill. He and his mother arrived shortly after the disappearance, joining Fred in the search. There's a troubling and emotional piece of information about Bill's role that has been debated in forums and media. Bill reportedly received multiple voicemails while Maura was missing. One of them allegedly contained the sound of heavy breathing and silence. Bill and his family interpreted it as possibly Maura trying to call him from an unfamiliar number. The police would never publicly confirm or deny whether the number was traced. The motel room? Fred Murray stayed at the Wells River Motel near the crash site. At one point, a cadaver dog was brought in, and the dog allegedly gave a hit near a specific room, leading Fred to believe Maura had either been there or that something bad had happened there. But this lead, like many others, never went anywhere. There were no records of Maura checking into any motel in the area. No one reported seeing a woman matching her description. The silence. In the days after Maura's disappearance, her bank cards, cell phone, ATM cards, driver's license were never used again. Not a single confirmed sighting was ever recorded. She did not contact family, friends, or anyone she was close to. It was as though she had stepped off the edge of the earth. Theories begin to swirl: foul play, flight, or suicide. By the second week after Maura Murray's disappearance, the narrative had fractured into multiple, often conflicting theories. The facts were few, the leads were cold, and frustration was mounting. Into that vacuum rushed speculations, some of it measured, some of it wild. From the very beginning, 3 dominant theories emerged, each with supporters, critics, and lingering unanswered questions. Theory number 1. Maura was abducted. This is the theory Fred Murray championed from the outset. In his view, Maura did not run, did not die by suicide, and did not get lost in the woods. She was taken either by a stranger or someone she knew. Supporters of this theory point to the suddenness of her disappearance just minutes before police arrived. No signs of struggle, but no signs of intentional flight either. No activity on her credit cards, phone, or bank accounts after February 9th. The dog scent trail, which allegedly ended abruptly at a cross street, suggesting she was picked up by a vehicle. Fred believed that someone who lived nearby could have seen her walking along the road and lured her into a car under the guise of help. Some speculated it could have been a local with criminal history or someone familiar with the area. Critics of this theory note the lack of forensic evidence. No hair, blood, clothing, or belongings were ever found to support an abduction. The car showed no signs of a struggle. Still, the sheer vanishing act nature of Maura's case keeps this theory alive in the minds of many. Theory number 2. She walked into the woods and died. Law enforcement officials initially leaned toward a more mundane but tragic explanation. Maura, shaken and cold, may have wandered off the road and into the woods, where she succumbed to hypothermia or fell and was injured. Points supporting this theory. Temperatures that night were well below freezing. Maura may have been intoxicated, disoriented, or concussed. The remote, wooded terrain could easily conceal a body for years. Yet the intensive searches of the surrounding area with dogs, helicopters, and infrared scans turned up nothing. Critics say it's implausible that Maura could have walked far without leaving tracks, and the idea that no trace of her has ever been found despite multiple searches undermines the theory. Even in rugged conditions, decomposition and animal activity often leave evidence behind. Theory number 3. Maura ran away, a planned disappearance. Some believe Maura orchestrated her own disappearance. This theory suggests that her recent troubles, the car accident, the credit card fraud incident, family stress, academic pressure, and relationship issues, pushed her to abandon her life and start anew. Supporting arguments. She lied to her professors about a death in the family. She packed up some belongings but left others behind. She printed directions to lodging in Vermont. She withdrew cash, bought alcohol, and left without telling anyone. To some, this paints the picture of someone planning an escape, not a suicide, but a retreat from her life. But this theory also collapses under scrutiny. Maura left behind her ID, credit cards, and phone. There was no activity on her bank account after she left. No one has reported seeing or hearing from her in 20 years. Her nursing degree, which she was close to completing, and her long-term plans don't suggest someone ready to abandon her future. Variations and hybrid theories. Over time, the theories evolved and branched off. Did Maura meet someone online and plan to run away with them? Did she plan to disappear, but something unexpected happened along the way? Was she picked up voluntarily, only for things to turn dark? Could she have been catfished or lured to the area under false pretenses? Was Maura the victim of a serial predator operating in the White Mountains region? Each of these variations attempts to solve the puzzle that has haunted family, investigators, and amateur sleuths alike. How does a healthy, intelligent, resourceful woman vanish in minutes, leaving no trace? The media and early speculation. The national media took note of the case within weeks. CNN, Nancy Grace, 2020s, and other outlets covered Maura's disappearance, especially given its bizarre nature and eerie similarities to fictional mysteries. The fact that she was young, white, attractive, and educated triggered what some referred to as missing white woman syndrome, heightened media interest in cases involving a specific demographic. This media attention brought with it more theories, more speculation, and, unfortunately, more misinformation. Some people sent in tips that were vague or clearly false. Others claimed to have seen her hiking, waitressing, or driving in other states. None of these sightings were confirmed. The case had entered the strange fog that surrounds high-profile disappearances, where fact, theory, and obsession start to blur. The Butsons' surveillance tape and the rag in the tailpipe. As weeks turned into months with no sign of Maura Murray, investigators and her family clung to the few strange, scattered details left behind, clues that seemed minor at first but grew more sinister as the trail went cold. Two of the most confounding pieces of potential evidence were a security camera recording and that bizarre mechanical anomaly, the rag in the tailpipe. The Butsons' supermarket surveillance tape, one of the last known appearances of Maura Murray on camera, came not long before she vanished when she stopped at a Butsons supermarket in Amherst, New Hampshire on February 9th, the day she left you. There, she was seen purchasing alcohol, including Bailey's Irish Cream, vodka, and a box of Frangia wine. Some of these items were found inside the Saturn following the crash, but the tape didn't answer any of the deeper questions. Why had she bought that much alcohol? Was she planning a solo getaway, or to meet someone? Was she already emotionally or mentally unraveling? Later examination of the tape showed Maura appearing calm and composed. She didn't look like someone preparing to vanish forever, or someone intoxicated. She was focused, as if on a mission. That calmness only deepened the mystery. When Fred Murray requested the tape as part of his own investigation, he expressed frustration that it wasn't released immediately or viewed more thoroughly by police. The rag in the tailpipe, a mechanical mystery. Of all the details at the crash scene, none has sparked more speculation than the white rag stuffed into the Saturn's tailpipe. Here's what's known. The rag didn't belong to police or a first responder. It was visibly sticking out of the exhaust pipe. It may have been placed there before the crash, during travel. Fred Murray later explained that he had taught Maura to use a rag in the tailpipe to reduce smoke from the exhaust when the car burned oil. Her Saturn was old, prone to stalling, and not in great shape. In his mind, it wasn't unusual for her to have done this, but others questioned, why was the car running with the rag still in the pipe? That could cause back pressure and potentially stall the engine. Was Maura trying to quietly disable the car to stage a breakdown? Could it have been an attempt at suicide via carbon monoxide? Unlikely. There was no body inside the car, and the windows were not closed tightly enough. Or was it staged by someone else after the crash, possibly to disable the vehicle permanently? Still others floated a chilling idea. If someone had been following Maura, or had contact with her before or after the crash, could they have placed the rag in the tailpipe to disable her vehicle, a form of mechanical sabotage? There was no conclusive forensic testing done on the rag to determine whether it had DNA or fingerprint evidence. If such testing was conducted, the results were never publicly released. A timeline under a microscope. In reviewing the rag and tape together, investigators and online sleuths tried to reconstruct Maura's final hours before her disappearance. 3:15 p.m., Maura leaves the UMass campus. Between 3:30 and 4 p.m., she withdraws $280 from her bank account. Stops at Butsons supermarket. Sometime before 7 p.m., she drives north through New Hampshire. 7:27 p.m., the crash on Route 112 is reported. So, Why would someone with a full tank of gas, directions to a scenic area, and recently purchased alcohol disable her own car? The facts didn't align neatly with any of the leading theories. She didn't seem suicidal. She didn't seem particularly distressed in the Butson's footage. And the crash was minor, not the kind of event that would trigger someone to suddenly run into the night, especially without shoes or supplies. It only deepened the divide between two camps, those who believed Maura planned to disappear, and those convinced she had met with foul play. No digital trail, no evidence. Maura's cell phone records offered no answers. Her final outgoing calls were to a voicemail box, her boyfriend, and the lodging facilities in Vermont. Her laptop didn't contain any email drafts or messages indicating a planned trip with someone else, and none of the motel numbers she called had confirmed bookings under her name. It was as though she was in motion, but not toward a defined destination, running from something, or perhaps just trying to be alone for a few days. But if that was the case, why did she disappear so completely and so quickly after the crash? Fred Murray's obsession with the rag. Fred Murray became obsessed with the rag as a clue. He firmly believed that Maura's car had been tampered with her, that she had been tricked into disabling it herself. Over the years, he petitioned for access to the Saturn, which was held in police custody. He wanted independent forensic testing, but his requests were denied for many years. When he was finally able to examine the vehicle, it was after over a decade, and much of the potential evidence had degraded. His belief that the rag was a red flag for foul play would persist for the rest of his life. The Murray family and public pressure. As weeks turned into months, the search for Maura Murray began to morph from a missing persons case into a deeply emotional battle between a grieving family, desperate for answers, and local law enforcement agency determined to control the narrative. At the center of this tension was Fred Murray, Maura's father, who quickly became the face of the search and a polarizing figure in the case. Fred Murray, a father's crusade. From the moment Fred was informed that Maura's Saturn had been found abandoned on a rural New Hampshire road, he didn't believe the official line. To him, it was clear that something had gone terribly wrong, that someone had taken his daughter. Fred wasted no time. He traveled from Massachusetts to Haverhill regularly, organizing his own searches, putting up missing person flyers, and trying to knock on every door within miles of the crash site. He believed the initial investigation had been mishandled and that police were stonewalling the family. This belief only intensified over time. Fred began publicly stating that he believed the police knew more than they were letting on. He filed multiple Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests for the accident report, 911 call logs, witness statements, internal investigation notes. Most of these were denied or heavily redacted, citing that the case remained an open investigation. Fred suspected a cover-up, or at least a deep unwillingness by local authorities to acknowledge mistakes or entertain new leads. Tensions with law enforcement. Over the years, the relationship between the Murrays and the New Hampshire State Police deteriorated rapidly. The family accused investigators of failing to secure the crash site as a crime scene, not conducting a thorough search of nearby properties, dismissing leads too quickly, not pursuing forensic analysis of the car in a timely manner. Law enforcement, on the other hand, painted Fred as combative and distrustful, someone who interfered with the investigation by turning to the media and independent search teams. Fred wasn't shy about giving interviews. He told newspapers and TV stations, "They want us to believe she just wandered off, froze, and disappeared." But that didn't happen. Somebody knows something. His anger came from heartbreak, but it was directed at the very people who were tasked with finding his daughter. The family's independent searches, with help from volunteers, including many complete strangers. The Murrays organized search parties, including ground sweeps of woods near Route 112, flyers distributed across New England, door-to-door canvassing in surrounding neighborhoods, even bringing in cadaver dogs and private detectives. One of the most persistent rumors was that a nearby property and A-frame house might have held clues. A local man allegedly behaved strangely after the disappearance, and rumors spread that his basement might contain evidence. Fred tried for years to have the home searched. Eventually, in 2006, a forensic team examined the basement, A sample believed to be blood was taken from the floorboards, but authorities later stated it was too degraded to be tested conclusively. Maura's siblings and their own grief. Maura's disappearance shattered her close-knit family. Her siblings responded differently. Julie, her older sister and fellow West Point cadet, kept a lower public profile, though she supported Fred and the searches. Kathleen, whose troubled phone call on February 5th may have been a factor in Maura's emotional state, later struggled with guilt and addiction. She publicly admitted that Maura may have been emotionally fragile in those final days. The family would later admit that Maura had been under significant stress, personal, academic, and emotional. But no one believed it was enough to explain a total vanishing. Public pressure and media coverage. The more Fred pushed, the more national attention the case received. It aired on 2020, Dateline, NBC. Disappeared on Investigation Discovery. Numerous true crime podcasts, which began surfacing in the 2010s. These stories often portrayed Maura as a beautiful, mysterious, all-American girl whose case was frozen in time. They amplified Fred's voice, but also attracted criticism, especially from law enforcement, who felt the media was undermining the investigation. Still, for many Americans, Maura Murray's case became a symbol of something deeper: the way people can vanish, the pain of uncertainty, and the deep distrust that often arises between grieving families and institutional power. A family without closure. Fred Murray never stopped searching. He filed lawsuits. He challenged the New Hampshire Attorney General's office. He drove the same roads again and again. "I'll never stop," he told reporters. "They can say whatever they want, but I'm going to find my daughter." That raw devotion to truth, to memory, to justice became one of the most human, enduring aspects of the Maura Murray case. But even as the years wore on, and as hope dimmed, Fred clung to one central belief: Maura didn't disappear voluntarily. Someone did this. The internet investigators, Reddit, blogs, and armchair detectives. As the official investigation into Maura Murray's disappearance slowed and leads dried up, a new kind of energy began to swell, not in the police department or the woods of New Hampshire, but online. The internet, especially forums, blogs, and later Reddit, gave rise to a digital army of amateur sleuths who took up Maura's case with obsessive fervor. They weren't professionals. They weren't even connected to the Murray family. But they were dedicated, detail-obsessed, and relentlessly curious. Some believe they have kept Maura's case alive. Others say they've only muddied the water. The birth of the Maura Murray online community. In the mid-2000s, message boards like Web Sleuths became the first major hubs of discussion about Maura's disappearance. Early posters dissected the timeline of her final days, the inconsistencies in witness statements, her emotional state, the behavior of police and the Murray family. They also examined more obscure details like the exact positioning of Maura Saturn, the number of reported wine containers, and the angle of the vehicle on Route 112. As newer platforms like Reddit emerged, entire threads and subreddits, especially our Maura and our Unresolved Mysteries, were dedicated to speculation, theory crafting, and sourcing any possible new clue. The first true crime case of the internet age. Some call Maura Murray's case the first viral missing persons case of the internet era. It had all the ingredients that fueled public obsession: a young, attractive college student, a mysterious lie to professors, a sudden disappearance in a remote area, no physical evidence, body, or clear suspects. Family versus police drama. A series of bizarre, open-ended clues. Users created detailed Google Maps, overlays, document timelines, and comparison charts of witness statements. They discussed every frame of the Butson surveillance video. They questioned the rag. They debated Maura's mindset. Some even visited the crash site, taking photos and conducting amateur searches of the surrounding terrain. Theories and conflicts online. Not all digital detectives agreed. The online community quickly fractured into competing factions. The foul play crowd convinced someone abducted or murdered Maura. The Runner theory believers who maintained she fled voluntarily. The suicide or overdose group who theorized she walked into the woods and died. And even fringe theorists who floated wild ideas ranging from sex trafficking rings to witness protection. This division mirrored a larger truth. The case was so vague, so empty of hard facts, that any theory could feel plausible and none could be proved. The rise of blogs and investigative podcasts. In 2011, writer James Renner launched a blog documenting his own investigation into the case. His work would become both influential and controversial. Renner's theory leaned toward Maura running away to start a new life. He believed she may have crossed into Canada or assumed a new identity. Renner also claimed to have found a nurse in Canada who matched Maura's description, accused certain individuals of withholding information, published personal details about Maura's past including sealed police reports and family dynamics. While many applauded Renner's bold, unfiltered approach, others including the Murray family strongly objected. They felt he sensationalized Maura's life, invaded her privacy, and misrepresented the facts. Later, the Missing Maura Murray podcast, created by Lance Rienstierna and Tim Polari, took a more balanced and respectful approach. The podcast aired in dozens of episodes, conducting interviews with witnesses, journalists, true crime experts, members of Maura's family, some reluctant at first. It helped bring a new generation of listeners into the case and raised awareness beyond traditional news coverage. The good and the ugly. The internet's involvement in Maura's case brought visibility and ongoing pressure on law enforcement, but it also brought misinformation, online harassment, and personal attacks. Some anonymous posters doxed people they believed were hiding something, harassed friends and family members, fabricated false sightings, made up theories so elaborate they seemed fictional. At one point, members of the online community accused Butch Atwood, the bus driver who had offered to help Maura, of being involved in her disappearance. These claims were never backed by evidence and deeply disturbed his family. He died in 2006 without ever being charged or officially suspected. Maura's legacy in the digital age. Despite the chaos, the digital world kept the case alive. When law enforcement went quiet, Reddit threads stayed busy. When years passed without a press release, bloggers dug deeper. And when the case seemed frozen in time, podcasts revived public interest. If not for the internet, I truly believe Maura's story would have been forgotten, said one journalist. In that sense, Maura Murray became more than a missing person. She became a symbol of the new era of public-led investigations, where questions don't die when authorities stop asking, and a single case can be picked apart by thousands of minds at once. 2005-2011 stalled leads and false hope. The years immediately following Maura Murray's disappearance were a blur of searches, disappointment, and obsession. As the case faded from national headlines, her family and the online community continued to chase any thread that might explain how a 21-year-old nursing student could vanish on a cold February night without leaving so much as a shoe print behind. Between 2005 and 2011, there were moments of hope, flickers of possibility, but they all ended the same way. Dead ends. 2005, the first year without Maura. The Murray family, still raw with grief and rage, remained active. Fred made frequent visits to Haverhill, often searching the woods, talking to locals, and trying to pressure investigators to release more information. That year, a rumor began to circulate about a local property near the crash site, 10A Frame House, less than a mile away. Several residents claimed a man living there had behaved strangely in the days following Maura's disappearance. Years later, a carpet sample from that home reportedly tested positive for trace amounts of blood, but law enforcement declined to prosecute, citing a lack of usable DNA. This tip became one of the most debated elements in the case, evidence that seemed promising but went nowhere. 2006 to 2007, frustration and division. During this period, Maura's case transitioned from a family-driven search into a publicly dissected mystery, increasingly shaped by true crime forums and amateur investigators. The Murrays became more guarded, wary of speculation, and at times critical of online sleuths and the media. Fred, in particular, grew increasingly confrontational in public statements. "They're not investigating this. They're sitting on it. They know something and won't tell us." Yet no significant updates came from the New Hampshire State Police. They insisted the case remained open, but refused to release files, including the original 911 call logs. photos of the Saturn, and the full police report from the crash scene. This secrecy only fanned the flames of public suspicion. Bill Rausch under scrutiny. Around 2007, online communities began focusing on Maura's boyfriend, Bill Rausch. Some pointed out he had received voicemails with breathing sounds shortly after Maura vanished. He allegedly called Maura's friends repeatedly after her disappearance, sometimes aggressively. He later became involved in controversies unrelated to Maura, including professional misconduct allegations. To be clear, Bill Rausch has never been named a suspect by law enforcement. Still, the scrutiny of his actions, fueled largely by the internet, further complicated public perception of the case and led to division among the online community. Some believed he had nothing to do with Maura's disappearance. Others were convinced he was hiding something. Fred, for his part, continued to support Bella, at least publicly. 2008, the anniversary. The 4th anniversary of Maura's disappearance marked a painful milestone. By then, many who had been active in the early days of the case had burned out or moved on. But the Murray family stayed active. In interviews, Fred expressed disbelief that not a single confirmed sighting had occurred. No bank use, no phone calls, no identification. Nobody disappears that clean unless someone helped them disappear, made sure they never came back. He also fought for access to the Saturn Maura's crashed car. He wanted an independent forensic analyst to examine it. The car, however, had remained in state police custody since 2004. 2009 to 2010, a case grows cold. During these years, Maura's case became increasingly dormant in the public eye. There were occasional spikes in interest, especially when bloggers or amateur investigators published new theories, but no law enforcement updates and no new evidence were announced. At the same time, the online investigation grew more advanced. Users began geotagging timelines, using GPS mapping, crowdsourcing FOIA requests, collecting scans of newspaper clippings and early interviews, digitizing archives of unsolved disappearances near the New Hampshire-Vermont border. A few pointed out strange similarities between Maura's case and other disappearances in the area, including that of Brianna Maitland, a Vermont teenager who vanished just 5 weeks later in March 2004. Brianna's car was found backed into a barn just as mysteriously abandoned as Maura's. The FBI has never officially linked the two cases, but the similarities continue to fuel speculation. 2011, a new generation discovers the case. The rise of podcasting and long-form journalism around 2010-2011 gave Maura's story new life. Writers began publishing feature-length essays, and true crime podcasts started to take interest. James Renner launched his investigative blog in 2011, claiming he would pursue the case like a journalist chasing a novel. His work was controversial, but it reintroduced Maura's story to a broader audience. Fred Murray continued to petition the state of New Hampshire, even requesting help from state legislators, private investigators, the FBI. His efforts mostly stalled, but his public statements grew sharper. He suggested law enforcement was actively hiding information. The state pushed back, stating they could not comment on an active investigation. Still, there were no arrests, no suspects, and no trace of Maura. By the end of 2011, Maura's disappearance had settled into a grim routine. The public remembered her in bursts. The internet speculated wildly. The family grieved quietly, but never gave up, and the police said nothing at all. Maura Murray was no longer just a missing person. She had become a symbol of the unknowable, a case both too cold and too strange to forget. 2012 to 2017, the disappeared episode. DNA tests and the return of the A-frame rumors. Between 2012 and 2017, the disappearance of Maura Murray found new life in the public eye. Her case, once thought to be fading into obscurity, was suddenly everywhere again thanks to television, podcasts, YouTube, and true crime blogs. With this renewed attention came fresh questions, rumors, and renewed hope, but also, once again, no answers. This was the era where Maura's case evolved from an open file in a small town to a nationally recognized cold case, dissected by millions across the globe. 2012, Disappeared brings national attention again. In late 2012, the cable network Investigation Discovery aired a highly anticipated episode of its hit series, Disappeared, titled Miles to Nowhere, an hour-long, professionally produced documentary about Maura's case. The show laid out the timeline, family interviews, and theories with careful structure. It featured interviews with Fred and Julie Murray, footage of the crash site, reenactments of Maura's final days, details about the Butson supermarket visit, the email to professors, and the call to a Vermont inn. Fred's heartbreak was visible and raw on screen. He was candid about his anger toward the police. They know something, but they won't tell me. The episode reignited widespread interest. Within days, message boards exploded with renewed analysis. Traffic to Maura-related websites soared. Many younger viewers, now teenagers or in college themselves, were discovering Maura's story for the first time. 2013-2014, A-frame house theories resurface. With renewed national attention came a re-examination of one of the most persistent and mysterious rumors in the case, the A-frame house, located less than a mile from where Maura's Saturn was found in 2004. Years earlier, a cadaver dog had allegedly hid on the property's basement. In 2006, a stained piece of carpet from the home had been removed and tested for blood. No charges or suspects were ever announced, but in 2013, James Renner and a group of online sleuths made headlines when they claimed the sample should be retested using modern DNA technology with help from a new homeowner who had acquired the property. The carpet sample was finally submitted to a private lab for analysis in 2016. Renner would later reveal that the lab confirmed the presence of blood DNA. The sample likely came from two individuals. One profile was male and the other inconclusive. Critically, the blood did not match any known samples from the Murray family. Was this the result of contamination, innocent residue from years of tenants, or something darker? The lab's findings weren't shared with law enforcement at first. When they eventually were, authorities made no public statement, continuing to cite the case as an active investigation. This silence only fueled conspiracy theories. The public wanted to know, why wouldn't the police investigate further? Had they already ruled this out, or was something being protected? 2015, DNA, podcasts, and the power of the crowd. By now, the true crime podcast boom was fully underway. In the wake of Serial's explosive success, the Missing Maura Murray podcast launched in 2015, created by Tim Polari and Lance Riansterna. The show quickly grew a large and loyal following. It stood out for its methodical approach, chronologically structured episodes, respectful interviews with family members, transparent fact-checking of online theories, on-location visits to Haverhill, NA. The podcast soon drew in experts, eyewitnesses, and even former law enforcement officers. Listeners could hear the voices of those who were there that night. It gave the case human texture, helping Maura's story rise above the noise of speculation and paranoia. Many podcast fans became active investigators themselves, contributing maps, records, and even connecting dots that had previously been overlooked. 2016-2017, hope and heartache. While the renewed interest brought momentum, it also brought strain. Fred Murray remained at the center of the public spotlight, but increasingly, he refused interviews. He had come to believe that law enforcement was actively covering something up, and that no amount of pressure would change their stance. The 13th anniversary of Maura's disappearance in 2017 was marked by a public memorial near the crash scene, a somber gathering of locals, supporters, family members, and podcasters. A blue ribbon was tied to a tree where Maura's Saturn once sat. Candles were lit, people held signs reading "Justice for Maura," and "No one vanishes without a trace." In an interview that year, Julie Murray, Maura's sister, said, "We still don't have closure. We still don't have answers. But we're not going anywhere. A case on the edge of solvability." By 2017, Maura's case had gone from a local news item to one of the most widely discussed disappearances in modern American history. Yet it was also one of the most frustratingly unchanged. The question still stood, as stark as ever. Why did Maura lie to her professors? Who was she going to meet, if anyone? Why did she drive to such a remote location? Why bring alcohol and withdraw cash, but leave behind her ID and phone? And how did she vanish in a populated area with neighbors just steps away? For all the theories, for all the efforts, and for all the technology available, there was still no trace, no remains, no confirmed sightings, no suspects. Maura Murray had become, in many ways, a ghost of the digital age on the present in discussion, but never seen again in reality. 2018 to 2020, Oxygen docuseries, state police involvement, and the FBI steps in. By 2018, Maura Murray's name had become nearly synonymous with modern American cold cases. Her story was now a reference point in discussions of missing persons, a template for online sleuths, and a topic of endless debate. Yet, as public interest surged again, law enforcement, after years of silence, began to re-engage with the case in a more visible way. This was a time of renewed media focus, government involvement, and more questions than answers. The Oxygen Network docuseries 2018. In September 2018, the Oxygen Network premiered a 6-part true crime docuseries titled The Disappearance of Maura Murray. This was the most ambitious, high-budget project to date focused on Maura's case. Hosted by investigative journalist Maggie Frayling, with background in true crime reporting, the series aimed to reconstruct Maura's final days, interview family members, former friends, witnesses, and law enforcement, revisit key theories, conduct new fieldwork, including DNA testing and visits to long-suspected locations. The series brought renewed national attention to Maura's story, introducing it to a broader, television-oriented audience. Highlights included interviews with Fred and Julie Murray, on-camera visits to the A-frame house, a meeting with James Renner, who had become a lightning rod in the community, a deep dive into Maura's mental health, prior incidents at West Point, and her personal life. The docuseries was praised for its careful tone and attempt to balance sensitivity with inquiry. Still, it didn't uncover a smoking gun, but it did pressure law enforcement to reaffirm their active investigation. State police, this is still open. Shortly after the Oxygen docuseries aired, the New Hampshire State Police made a rare public statement. They confirmed that the case remained open and that they were working in collaboration with the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit, the Attorney General's Office, the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICE. It was one of the first times in over a decade that federal agencies were mentioned in connection to Maura's case. This raised hopes that new technology or resources could break open old leads. Julie Murray, Maura's sister, and now a more vocal figure in public, released a statement. Our family is encouraged that law enforcement is taking renewed interest. We want transparency, accountability, and answers. Yet, the public quickly noticed that despite renewed engagement, no new evidence was disclosed. The 911 call logs, witness notes, and search warrants still remained sealed, the blue ribbon tree removed. One moment from this period that caused community outrage was the removal of a small tree that had become an informal memorial for Maura. Near the spot where her Saturn had crashed on Route 112, a tree had stood adorned for years with blue ribbons, missing person flyers, notes from family and strangers, flowers and stuffed animals. The New Hampshire Department of Transportation eventually removed the tree in late 2019, citing safety concerns and highway regulations. This triggered an outcry from supporters and family members. Fred Murray said that was the one place people could go to remember her. Now it's just empty. In its place, the community tied a ribbon to a new tree, just steps away, quietly resisting the erasure of memory, unconfirmed leads, and ongoing forensics. During this time, several developments made headlines, but yielded no breakthroughs. A ground-penetrating radar scan of the A-frame property was conducted in 2018. No body or irregularities were detected beneath the concrete basement floor. Multiple properties in the area were searched using cadaver dogs again. Nothing confirmed. A tipster claimed Maura was buried in a nearby basement, but the foundation was cleared. An anonymous letter, allegedly sent to police, suggested Maura had been killed and buried near a farmhouse. Police investigated, but found no evidence. Meanwhile, the private DNA analysis of the A-frame carpet sample, now over a decade old, still remained a point of contention. While no official link to Maura was made, some believed the case was simply too degraded for conclusions. Julie Murray, a new advocate. With Fred aging and stepping back from the media spotlight, Julie Murray became the new public face of the search for Maura. She began giving interviews, attending true crime conventions, and engaging with journalists and podcasts. Julie, a former military officer like Maura, approached the case with focus and professionalism. She did not dismiss theories, but insisted on sticking to verified facts. "There's so much noise around Maura's case," she said. "It's time to clear that out and focus on what matters." In 2020, Julie helped launch a Change.org petition, urging the release of all police records related to Maura's disappearance. It garnered thousands of signatures and placed further pressure on New Hampshire authorities. FBI joins the search quietly. Perhaps the most significant development in this era came not with a press conference, but a quiet listing on the FBI's VCAP database, the federal system for tracking violent crimes and missing persons across jurisdictions. Maura Murray's case was formally entered into ViceAP in 2020, a move that some saw as symbolic but potentially important. ViceAP is often used to identify patterns in serial offenses, cross-reference other missing person or homicide cases, apply behavioral profiling tools. While the FBI has never made public statements about its findings, sources confirm that all known forensic evidence, including car samples, DNA swabs, and the blood-stained carpet from the A-frame house, had been logged and analyzed. Still, no arrests, no remains, no resolution. A lingering absence. 16 years had passed. Theories had come and gone. Suspicions had shifted. New eyes had come to the case. But the central fact remained. Maura Murray was still missing. In Haverhill, there was no marker, no shrine, no historical note of what happened on that curve of Route 112. But for the thousands of people who followed her, story in line and off she remained as present as ever. To them, she was not just a mystery. She was a person. 2021 to 2024, modern breakthroughs, AI profiling, and the search for resolution. As time passed, Maura Murray's case transformed from a cold case into a cultural legend, not because it was solved, but because it wasn't. By 2021, nearly 2 decades had gone by without a trace of her, yet the questions surrounding her disappearance had never faded. In fact, they had intensified, sharpened by new technology, shifting public interest. In the ever-evolving world of true crime media, this era ushered in new methods of investigation, including AI analysis, renewed forensic testing, and an increasingly organized push by both the Murray family and independent experts to bring final resolution to a case that had long haunted New England and the internet. 2021, the COVID-era slowdown and digital resurgence. The COVID-19 pandemic slowed physical investigations in many cases across the U.S., including Maura's. Planned in-person searches and evidence reprocessing were delayed. But in the digital space, interest surged once again. Podcasts and YouTube channels devoted entire series to Maura's case. Reddit users and independent sleuths launched renewed timeline reviews. Crowdsourced databases were compiled, comparing Maura's disappearance with other unsolved cases along the East Coast. A surprising number of these new contributors were young, too young to have remembered the original 2004 news stories. But Maura's case had become timeless in the true crime space, a perfect storm of mystery, emotion, and just enough clues to keep the search alive. 2022, artificial intelligence enters the case. In 2022, digital forensics experts began experimenting with AI and machine learning tools to aid in cold cases. Though not officially sanctioned by law enforcement, some independent researchers applied these tools to Maura's case, including natural language processing (NLP) to scan old witness statements for contradictions, AI facial recognition to compare Maura's photos with unidentified Jane dozen missing persons databases, predictive movement modeling using Maura's known behavior, route, and geography to suggest possible outcomes post-crash. While none of these efforts led to breakthroughs, they showcased how modern tech could be used to reassess old data through a new lens. One project used AI to scan over 500 Jane Doe cases in the US and Canada, comparing bone structure and anthropometric data with Maura's known medical and dental records. None were confirmed matches, but a few raised enough flags to be re-examined by police. Still, No identification was made. 2023. DNA in familial searching. In 2023, the success of genetic genealogy in solving decades-old cases, most famously the Golden State Killer, led Maura's family and some advocates to push for renewed DNA comparisons. Requests were made to reanalyze the A-frame carpet sample using next-gen sequencing, compare unknown DNA from the Saturn's interior to familial databases, upload available evidence to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, services that law enforcement had increasingly relied on, while the state of New Hampshire never officially confirmed their methods. Sources close to the investigation indicated that some DNA was submitted, though the results were inconclusive, either due to degradation or lack of a match in the system. Still, this was one of the first times since 2004 that forensic science had caught up to the case. 2024, 20 years missing. February 9th, 2024, marked 20 years since Maura Murray vanished. In honor of the milestone, her family organized a virtual vigil live-streamed across social media. Supporters across the country tuned in. Julie Murray delivered a moving address. "We never stopped searching. We never stopped loving her. And we never stopped believing the truth will come out. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but it will." A documentary short was released on YouTube, featuring drone footage of the crash site, a new interview with the first officers on scene, emotional testimonials from friends and family, a haunting montage of the many Jane Does who were ruled out over the years. That same month, the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit released an updated statement. "This case remains open and active. We continue to receive tips and conduct periodic reviews of all available evidence. Yet no details were offered. No new evidence was shared. No person of interest was named. Modern theories revisited. With 2 decades of hindsight and expanded context, newer experts had begun reframing Maura's disappearance into more refined theories. Speculative, more grounded. 1. Voluntary disappearance, gone wrong. Some believe Maura may have run away, intending to take time for herself. But something went wrong: an accident in the woods, a fall, exposure. Yet extensive searches turned up nothing. 2. Foul play by a local resident. The proximity of homes and the eerie timing have fueled suspicions that someone living nearby may have picked her up after the crash, and that she met with harm shortly after. But this theory has no confirmed suspects. 3. Psychological break and dissociation. Mental health experts have proposed that Maura may have experienced a fugue state of form of dissociative amnesia and either wandered off into the wilderness or reinvented herself under a new identity. 4. Serial offender theory. Some believe Maura may have been abducted by a serial predator. However, no pattern of similar abductions in the area has ever been linked to her case. In short, every theory is possible, and yet every theory feels incomplete. What we still don't know, as of 2024, the following facts remain unchanged. Maura Murray left UMass Amherst on February 9, 2004. She crashed on Route 112 near Woodsville, New Hampshire. Witnesses spoke to her briefly. She vanished within a 7-minute window. No verified sightings, communications, or remains have ever been confirmed. Her case remains officially unsolved. Theories revisited, truth, myth, and the thin line between. 20 years after Maura Murray vanished, the case has become as much about what we think we know as what we don't. The deeper investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths go, the murkier it becomes. The details blur, the facts fracture under pressure, and the line between what is truth and what is legend grows perilously thin. In this chapter, we look at the 4 major theories, one final time with the benefit of hindsight, expanded forensic knowledge, and all the digital sleuthing the internet age can muster. Theory 1. Maura ran away to start over. Overview. Some believe Maura left UMass Amherst intentionally planning a break, an escape, or even a permanent disappearance. To them, the lies she told professors, the money she withdrew, and the wine she purchased suggest a coordinated exit. Supporting points. She lied about a death in the family to leave campus. She withdrew most of her bank account, $280. She had no known reason to be in Wood. She packed personal belongings in her dorm room into boxes. Weaknesses. She told no one of her plans, not her family, not friends, not even her boyfriend. There has never been a confirmed sighting of her in 20 years. No financial, digital, or communication trail has surfaced since that day. She left behind important documents, IDs, and access to her accounts. Most compelling counterpoint, if Maura had run away to start a new life, it is unlikely she would choose to crash her car in a rural area, leave her possessions behind, and then vanish on foot in freezing temperatures. Theory 2, foul play by a local. Overview. This theory suggests Maura was picked up or abducted by someone living nearby, possibly someone who had been watching her after the crash. Supporting points. Several houses lined Route 112, including one directly across from the crash site. There is a 7 to 10 minute window during which she disappears. The local bus driver, Butch Atwood, saw her seemingly uninjured and lucid. She vanished before police arrived, despite there being little cover from view. Circumstantial evidence. Suspicion around the A-frame house. Cadaver dog hits near local properties. Possible blood found on the floorboards, inconclusive DNA. Law enforcement's initial hesitation to search nearby homes. Weaknesses. No solid suspect has ever been identified. Forensic evidence is limited, contaminated, or inconclusive. Police say they've cleared all nearby residents. Theory 3. Psychological crisis and accidental death. Overview. This theory posits that Maura was experiencing a mental health breakdown, fled the scene to avoid consequences or due to panic, and died of exposure in the woods. Supporting points. Her behavior in the days before her disappearance was erratic. She had been involved in 2 car accidents within a week. She cried at work and may have been overwhelmed emotionally. February nights in northern New Hampshire can drop below freezing. Supporting circumstances. The area is heavily wooded and remote. Search dogs lost her scent a few hundred feet from the crash. Animals or nature could have concealed remains. Weaknesses. Multiple ground and aerial searches found nothing. Her footprints should have been visible in the snow. If she had wandered off and died of exposure, her body would likely have been found by now. Most compelling counterpoint. Hundreds of trained searchers combed the area with dogs and helicopters in the days after her disappearance. No clothing, no jewelry, no bones, nothing. Theory 4. Unknown serial predator or opportunist. Overview. The idea here is that Maura was abducted by a passing predator or trucker, transient or serial offender operating in the area. Supporting points. The area is close to interstate highways. She may have accepted a ride from a stranger while in distress. Other women have disappeared under similar circumstances in the Northeast. Comparisons. Brianna Maitland, 17, vanished just 70 miles away and 5 weeks later under similar conditions. Other unsolved cases along New England highways share themes. Young woman, remote area, abandoned car. Weaknesses. No witnesses saw a vehicle stop or a stranger approach. No patterns or suspects directly linked to Maura. Local law enforcement has not connected the case to any known offender. Most compelling counterpoint. In most abduction cases, some trace is left an item, a sighting DNA. With Maura, the complete absence of evidence casts doubt on the likelihood of this theory. The mythology of Maura. Beyond the theories, Maura's disappearance became a modern myth. Like D.B. Cooper or the Zodiac Killer, she represents an enigma too large to contain. Her story became a cautionary tale about being alone on a rural road, a symbol of distrust in law enforcement, a case study in digital obsession and amateur sleuthing, a tragedy of grief without answers. Maura Murray became a story people needed to solve, not just for her family, but for what it said about the world. The emotional toll. While the public debated, the Murray family lived with loss. Fred aged visibly. His once outspoken frustration turned to quiet mourning. Julie remained the voice of reason, advocacy, and strength. Their greatest fear wasn't that Maura was dead. Our fear, Julie said in 2024, is that she be forgotten. But Maura hasn't been forgotten. If anything, she's become more present than ever, etched into the fabric of the internet. Spoken of in classrooms, debated by experts and fans alike. Still, the question that matters most remains unanswered. What happened to Maura Murray? A vanishing that won't let go. Legacy, lessons, and the unsolved thread. The story of Maura Murray doesn't end, at least, not yet. There is no arrest, no grave, no final phone call. What remains is a powerful silence that stretches across 2 decades, filled with voices trying to fill it with theories, pleas, memories, and hope. In the absence of answers, Maura became more than a person. She became a symbol of what happens when someone disappears and the system fails to explain it. A symbol of how a digital age refuses to let mysteries go. A symbol of a sister, a daughter, a student who never got to finish her story. This chapter is not about solving the case. It's about what we've learned, because it hasn't been solved. The legacy of Maura Murray. 1. A new kind of investigation. Maura's case marked the beginning of a paradigm shift, where the public doesn't wait for law enforcement to act. Instead, people investigate on their own. Her disappearance laid the blueprint for future digital investigations. Before true crime became a genre of podcasts and TikTok threads, there was Maura. Her story spawned countless Reddit posts and tiny AI-assisted comparisons, a generation of internet sleuths, new standards of public records scrutiny, and FOIA requests. 2. Changes in cold case management. The persistent attention Maura's case received pressured New Hampshire law enforcement to create a cold case unit, publicly acknowledge unsolved cases, improve digital access to missing persons data, though they were often criticized for their secrecy. Maura's case highlighted a broader issue in the American justice system. Many cold cases remain cold because of limited communication, resources, and political will. 3. The human impact. For the Murray family, Maura's absence was a wound that never healed. Fred spent his retirement chasing shadows. Julie sacrificed peace of mind to become an advocate. The rest of Maura's loved ones, her college friends, her siblings, her mother grieved in ways the public will never fully see. They were forced to relive their pain every time the story resurfaced in a podcast or show. Yet they endured because forgetting would be worse. Lessons from the case. 1. Disappearances are not just mysteries. Every missing person is a person, not a puzzle. Maura's case became a cultural curiosity, but the tragedy is real and raw. Behind every clue is a broken heart. Behind every theory is someone still waiting for a phone call that won't come. 2. The internet is a double-edged sword. Online communities kept Maura's case alive, but they also spread misinformation, harassed witnesses, and created false leads. Some helped, others hurt. 3. Persistence matters. Fred and Julie Murray proved that persistence, even in the face of silence, can keep a case alive, though they never received the answers they deserved. Their refusal to let the world move on without Maura forced authorities, journalists, and the public to stay engaged. Where it stands now, 2025. Maura Murray has been missing for 21 years. She is listed in VICAP, NamUs, and international missing persons databases. Her DNA is on file with federal authorities. Her case is considered open but inactive. There is no suspect, no body, no crime scene. Maura was 21 when she disappeared. She would be 42 today. In the end, the girl in the cold. All that is known for sure is this. On February 9th, 2004, a college student drove into the White Mountains with no clear plan. She crashed her car on a quiet road. A neighbor offered help. She declined. Minutes later, she was gone. Gone without a trace. No blood, no struggle, no scream. The world kept turning. But in one corner of the country, time stopped, and it hasn't started again since. A final word from Julie Murray, 2024. There's no proof Maura is dead, and there's no proof she's alive, but she's real, and that means she deserves justice whatever form that takes. We're not giving up. We never have. Not until the very last answer is found. If you know something, if you or anyone you know has information related to the disappearance of Maura Murray, contact the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit at 603-271-2663 or submit an anonymous tip via their website. Even now, all it would take is one call.